call the special session to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Mayor Kavanaugh,
Here.
Vice Mayor Leger, Councilmember DePorter,
Here.
Councilmember Brown is absent, Councilmember Yates,
Present.
Councilmember Hanson is not here yet, and Councilmember Magazine.
All right, thank you. Discussion with direction to staff regarding updating and prioritizing the capital improvement projects. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, before you tonight is a special session on the capital improvement program. One of the most important actions and activities that occur throughout the year is planning for our future relating to our infrastructural needs. We do this through a capital improvement program that's typically a 5-year program. It's one of the most important things we do because planning for our future and our infrastructure needs helps satisfy our residents and the needs that they have for good roads and parks and other amenities that they take for granted. The staff has done a great job, in my opinion, with the available resources that we have to address our capital needs. And tonight, our Development Services Director, Paul Mood, who basically is the captain of the team related to the CIP, he's the one who's our guru relating to the CIP, is going to go ahead and do the overall presentation, and then he's going to have some assistance by Mark Mayer to go over his projects, and then Craig is going to also play a role in discussing the finances as it relates to the CIP. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Mood to begin his presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council members. As Grady said, this is the presentation for the Capital Improvement Program. What we're going to do is we're going to go through, there's going to be 3 sections. The first section is going to go through the current and completed projects. Second section is going to go through the projects that are in the next fiscal year. And then the third section is going to be for the future projects. So Mark and I are kind of tag team our projects, talk about them, and then if there's any finance type questions, we have Craig Rudolphi, the finance director, here as well. So the beginning part just kind of shows the different projects, if they've been initiated or not initiated. Not going to really spend too much time on this. This really just shows the dollar values currently on the books in the current CIP. When we get into the project slides, that's where you'll get most of the detail. First project is the Ashbrook Wash drainage improvements. This is a picture on Saguaro Boulevard. Project is currently under construction. It's going to be 6 new box culverts, a cell of box culverts across Saguaro, and there's also a cell of 6 across Bayfield Drive as well. This is a joint project with the Maricopa County Flood Control District. The County Flood Control District is actually the lead agency. The total cost of the project is roughly $2.3 million, and about $900,000 is a flood control grant. The remainder is made up mainly of our capital project fund. There's also some cost sharing with EPCOR and the sanitary district as well. Got some updates from the flood control staff, and the portion on Bayfield is supposed to be substantially complete by the end of May. This part on Saguaro, which is in the southbound lanes, is supposed to be substantially complete and open to traffic by the end of April, and then the northbound is supposed to be done by the end of July. They had a little delay in starting. They didn't want to have it dug up during the holiday season, and then when they dug it up right after the holidays, they had a week's worth of rain, so they got a little bit behind. Next project is Fire Station 2 relocation. The cost in the CIP is $3.8 million. Of that, $254,000 is from development fees and $150,000 is other. The other is from EPCOR. Currently working on an agreement with EPCOR to use a strip of their land as a shared driveway back to their facilities in the back, so we'll cost share on that. We anticipate bringing the architect's contract and the EPCOR reimbursement agreement to council in early April. And this is a rendering this is a different rendering from what has been shown before. We went through a selection process, and the selection team chose Hunt and Caraway Architects. And this was their rendering of a fire station that would fit in with the architecture of the surrounding neighborhood. Fountain Park Phase 6, I'll let Mark talk about this one.
Mayor and council, as you probably know, we have basically finished the construction of Fountain Park Phase 6. We are in the warranty period, with one exception. At your meeting on the 17th, I will be bringing forward a request to utilize leftover fees that we did not spend on the design to be able to complete the disc golf tee pads at Fountain Park at an expense of $8,000. Relatively small expense. Some of that would come from the fees left over from that we didn't use for design, and then $1,000 from the CIP contingency fund. The lighted bollards obviously are still an issue that we're working through. We'll have to see where those costs might ultimately go. The major components, if you recall, for the improvements included 3 of the monument signs, the lighting bollards, and then a complete redoing of the east parking lot that had deteriorated and did not have any lights in it. So both of those situations were rectified. It was also expanded a little bit, which created some issues for the disc golf, and which is why several of the pads are going to need to be removed and a couple of new ones poured. So that's what's included in the $8,000.
Mark, I know we've been troubleshooting 1 or 2 of the monument signs because there appears to be I don't know what you would call it, like a seepage or moisture that seems to constantly come through the paint that's on there. Want to just give the council an update what we're looking at with that?
Sure. We've had the representatives from the company out several times, as well as the second sub that actually did the work. As the town manager indicated, it appears to be that there's moisture or something getting either into or coming out of the concrete that they poured. And so they had a representative from the company that actually supplied the product. And at first it occurred on the monument that was off of El Lago. We also noticed it occurring on the one that's at the corner of Panorama and El Lago. And finally, just the other day, we noticed it was also occurring on the one on Saguaro and Palisades. So all 3 of them are now affected. But we've been assured, and again, it's under the warranty period, so they're responsible for fixing it. Again, whether or not it's the product itself or the installation, they're still working through those. But they have their technical people that are looking at and trying to figure out if they can decide what the issue or issues are.
One of the solutions we've talked about internally is possibly just not having a painted finish and just having this be sandblasted and just have, instead of the silver monument sign lettering, going to a black lettering, so you get the contrast between the concrete and that. It's a shame, but in a way, paint's going to be something that's going to be a future maintenance issue in the future. So, but anyways, we're going to work with the company to try to resolve this issue for us. Thank you, Mark.
All right, the next project is the Shave Boulevard widening project, and this project has been completed and is in the warranty phase. We have the Saguaro Boulevard reconstruction and Palisades and Saguaro traffic signal. This project is also complete. There is a few minor punch list items to take care of, and we're in the warranty phase. The lights at the intersection of Avenue of the Fountains and Saguaro went up yesterday. They were wired today. They are energized. They will remain on for 2 days so we can test the system, and then on Thursday they'll be switched over to the dusk to dawn timer. So you'll see those on at night. Some work we still need to do is there's some bike lane symbols we need to put down, and then the sanitary district has fiber optic vaults that run from the park to their facility on Pepperwood, and those vaults were not adjustable. So there's some dips in the pavement around those, so we're going to go back in and put in new vaults. The McDowell Mountain Road repairs, if you're heading out of town past the school on McDowell Mountain Road, there's a curve that's very bumpy. We have it in the capital projects to do a repair to that, a mill and overlay. It'll take their $65,000 programmed in CIP fund and $10,000 from the HERF fund. You should see a contract coming to council in the next month to do that work. We were going to wait until after the winter visitors have left, so there's less traffic out there. There's also the Fire Rock Parcel B project is using that as a haul route, so we wanted to wait till that was done. So we were thinking mid-May, early June, but then Adaro Canyon just got a haul route permit from the county to haul out to the Rio Tonto Verde area, and that could be through June. So we're probably going to, it's currently in this year's CIP, but we're also probably going to include it into next year's CIP in case we cannot do the project this year. We want the funding to be available to make the repair after July. Again, this is just the current fund balance and what's remaining on the projects. And I'll just flip through that quick. And then the next projects are the ones that we plan on doing the next fiscal year. The first one is miscellaneous drainage improvements. This project appears every year in the CIP. This is just a placeholder. What you can see here is a picture of Balboa Wash. It's on the west side of Fountain Hills Boulevard, just south of El Pueblo. The cars on the other side of the road are coming out El Pueblo. This just used to be a straight, smaller pipes. Whenever we have a developer that is looking to get rid of some fill material, and we know we need drainage improvements, we added extended culverts here and added the dirt over it to take care of an erosion issue. So this project is really just a placeholder if we have any opportunities that come up where we can work with a developer to make some drainage improvements. Next project, we're going to rename this one the Downtown Public Improvements. It probably shows different in your packets. And this is part of the downtown vision plan, master plan. So if there's any streetscape, sidewalk, lighting type improvements in the vision plan that council wants to do, then this money this money is a placeholder from the Downtown Strategy Fund to be able to do those improvements. If it's not budgeted and council comes up with an idea, there would not be any money available to fund a project.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yep.
The previous two pages said 200,000 for 8502, and this one says 400. So is that last year plus?
No, last year, in the current year CIP, it was programmed at $200,000 over 2 years, so $200,000 and $200,000.
Okay.
We just lumped it all into 1 year.
Got
It just gives you more flexibility if something comes up and you want to do a project.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Magazine.
I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't understand the last sentence. You said something about if we want to do something in the downtown.
Yeah, if a developer comes in or there's a specific project the council wants to do in the downtown area, the money's available to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Like you guys went back to council and added in the lights at Saguaro Boulevard and made a transfer of the downtown fund money. It could have been taken out of this project. It wasn't, but if something like that were to come up, then you could pull from it.
Madam Mayor,
Councilman Yates.
to be more specific, that funding can only be used for downtown.
Correct.
If we don't use it, we can't pull it to somewhere else.
No,
Thank you.
only the downtown.
Mayor, I had a question.
Vice Mayor Leger.
Thank you. Pavement, could that be utilized for pavement if we got to that point where we wanted to redo the pavement in the downtown district?
I would have to defer to the town attorney. I'm assuming it could be. Theoretically.
Is the downtown fund the source of the
The money,
funding for this?
yeah.
Okay.
At one time, that was labeled infrastructure improvement, and, I mean, it's kind of morphed into the downtown fund, but
The downtown fund is not very clearly defined and has pretty much been defined by councils as you went along. And so if as an economic development tool, improving the roads in the downtown area, I don't see why it wouldn't be available for that.
I would add, it shouldn't be used for like a slurry seal. If it was used, because that's maintenance. If it was a mill and overlay, then that would probably be acceptable. Chiller installation, this is to add the third chiller in our physical plant. You can see that there's a vacant pad there. When the library, museum, community center was built, 2 chillers were installed. When the town hall was built, the third chiller was never installed. The two chillers that are in operation are 15 years old, have a lot of runtime on them. They both need to be operating near 100% capacity in the warmer months, so there's no redundancy. Adding the third chiller will give us that redundancy in case one goes down, and just give us flexibility to cycle through them and start to keep hours off the existing chillers. We currently, Raymond Reese currently has a pretty extensive repair that's going to happen to these chillers before the summer months. We need to redo some of the valving. Tennis court rehabs, I'll let Mark talk about that one.
You may recall that we received a grant of $211,000 for this particular project. We are the sole source of tennis courts in town, as many of you probably know. The tennis courts are all original installations. We have done what we can as far as working with cracks and resealing and coloring, but we've reached the point now where we feel we need to do a replacement of. What we've basically priced here is what's called a post-tension kind of a concrete. It's more of a high-tech where you actually put the concrete under tension, which helps reduce the amount of cracking and displacement that takes place. It'll also be out of concrete instead of bituminous. So we're expecting, they're telling us we could get 50 years out of a tennis court instead of the 10 to 15 to 20 that we get typically now. So it is a more expensive product, but again, there's some benefits. So the overall project cost is estimated $390,000, and then there's the breakdown between the CIP. Interesting enough, because we have some leftover dollars from the construction, you may recall we had money left over not only at the very beginning when we awarded the bid, but we have monies left over after construction. So that $179,000 will be transferred from the Fountain Park Phase 6 reserve funds that were left over. So with that,
Mark, these
questions?
are the ones at Golden Eagle.
Yeah, we're doing 4 at Golden Eagle, and we're doing also, if the budget allows us, and the bid prices come in where we hope they will, it allows us to do the 2 at Fort Peak. So all the courts would get redone.
Okay.
So we're trying to time it again so that it's late enough that we miss the busy, like now, tennis season, and try to do it in the fall, early fall.
The tennis court that's on the school property there, that belongs to the school, the one they use for pickleball?
Correct. Those 2 belong to the school.
Okay, so they're responsible for it. That's not involved in this?
Correct.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. Councilman Magazine.
I think I need a little education.
Okay?
When you say, for example, 8,000 left over, which is going to be used for pads for disc golf, and 170-something left over, which is going to be transferred to the tennis courts, how are these decisions made?
I think,
Do we look at other priorities? I'm not against these. I'm
Sure.
just saying, how do you reach the point where you say we're going to transfer it from here to here or here to there?
well, we were looking at, in this particular case, looking at some way to fund the difference between the grant, obviously, and the project costs. And so because we had already set aside some funds to complete Fountain Park, and we're able to do that under budget, we obviously wanted to keep them in the park system if we could. So that's kind of why we're here tonight, is to discuss whether or not there's agreement on the project and how they get funded.
Are there other instances, and I may be getting ahead of you, are there other instances where money has been left over that we're suggesting it be transferred for other purposes?
I can only answer for my side of the CIP, but I'm not aware of any other transfers other than the one I mentioned as far as the disc golf pads.
If I may, council member, what we do typically is all the projects are in the CIP fund, so any savings stay in that fund. And so in this case, we had an internal discussion, and I said, well, we've got a grant, we've got to come up with the matching dollars. We were fortunate in that this year, Phase 6 is pretty much wrapped up, and it came so well under the engineer's estimate for the project, we were wanting to use the savings for that. But don't we have a couple items coming before council on the 17th, where we're wanting to use some of that for smaller dollar items that were Phase 6 savings?
Well, just the only one that I can think of off the top of my head is the disc golf pads.
Right.
Right.
But I thought there were one or two other smaller things that we were considering.
Not that I recall. I will double check, but nothing comes to my mind.
So the point is, Councilmember Magazine, is that We will bring things back to you one way or the other. So like tonight, obviously it's your discretion to figure out if you want to use the money that's currently there. It makes a lot of sense because it's a match for a grant. The other item, because we don't have the authorization as staff just to use the money that you authorized. So we have to come back and get you to approve the use of it for a different use than what was originally approved.
Yeah, you and I, we had a discussion about this, and I'm not in any way finding fault with staff on any of this, but whether it's this fund or another fund, I just think that anytime there's monies left over from anything, that council should be setting the priorities on where that money goes. We can get a recommendation, obviously, on all of them, but I just think we should know what all the options are so we can make an informed decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hanson.
Well, and kind of to that point, I think a priority that we have been talking about during the retreat is maintaining our facilities and our infrastructure. So I guess I look at something like the tennis courts and other things that, are existing amenities in the community that we have to keep up. So, I mean, I would see this as a very appropriate thing to be, transferring any savings over, because I think it falls within the guidelines of taking care of what we've got.
And I'll agree with that, because if you get lucky enough to get a grant like this and you're not willing to put the rest of the money in, then obviously you lose the grant.
Correct.
Okay.
Look, if I could just make myself clear, I'm not questioning any of that. I'm just simply, and I have no problem with putting the money in the tennis courts. I'm talking about a process. That's all, the process of getting to that point.
Well, I think that's what we're doing now. They're presenting us with the options, saying that, in their opinion, because we have the grant, the best use for that extra money is to put it here, and we could say the yes or no on that.
Right, but that's a recommendation of staff, which I understand. They didn't say, well, here are some other places we might want to put it. Let's discuss this. Now, I'm not saying we should. I'm simply talking about a process here, about making sure we know what the options are, rather than listening to one option and approving it.
Also, if I can get to Councilmember Hanson's point about the retreat and the discussion about the capital reserve study and the need for facilities and socking away money for facilities. As part of my proposed budget this year, I'm going to be recommending that the town council, through the appropriation process, transfer $1 million from general fund reserves to the new facilities reserve account. Now, that's starting the seed money, and we're not going to obviously be able to keep up with $1 million a year until we try to resolve some of these other financial issues. But to your point, that's what we're trying to do, because we do recognize that that's an inherent weakness that we have, and we're not currently taking care of those financial needs right now.
All right, Mark, you want to go on?
The next project has been one that's been reoccurring. Couple of developments that I think I mentioned to you last time. We have been approached by the sanitary district to potentially take the water directly from the sanitary district, and so it would not be pumped out of the lake for irrigation purposes. There's pros and cons. The pro is that obviously the water quality would be substantially better because it doesn't sit in the lake and deteriorate, frankly.
Ferment.
It's water quality, yes, and increasingly high levels of salt. One disadvantage, obviously, is there would be little or no circulation of the water that's in the remainder of the lake. What they had proposed was a dam within the pump house area that would receive the water and then would actually pump out of that instead of the lake as a whole. But that means that the overall quality of the lake would potentially decline because we're not pulling any water out of it. So the only water we would lose is through evaporation, so the water quality would likely decline. But we've asked a consultant to take a look at that. His report's due by the end of this month. They've also suggested a number of options that would improve the water quality. Those include tripling the amount of aerators that we have out there, putting what they call horizontal water movers in each of the coves, because what tends to happen is if we do get the growth of algae, which causes the odors, it tends to be carried by the wind and pushed all across the water and tends to concentrate in the back of coves. And so the horizontal water movers would push that material back out of the coves and into the areas where the aerators are and break that up, which is what we were trying to accomplish. So we've got a number of options we're working on. We still need to work through the process, so this is included as a project for the future.
Is running the fountain a little bit longer for aerating it on the table also?
Yes, well, actually, the option that we're considering, if we can get sufficient amount of aeration from the aerators themselves, we may be actually able to reduce the amount of runtime, which would save us substantial dollars.
I
Reduce
don't know
or
if we
eliminate.
want to do that.
Well, again, we would monitor the water quality to make sure that it's working, but that's the intent, is because we'd actually be going from 12 aerators to 36. So a substantial more aerators out in the lake than what we have now.
I'd still like to
Yeah.
keep that fountain running as
Yeah,
long as
that's
we
a
can.
policy question that you will definitely weigh in
Yeah.
if and when that comes to the council.
So what exactly does the 205,000 include? Does that include some of these other possibilities with the aerators, or just,
Yes, it includes the aerators and the water movers, but does not include the dam, for instance, that would have to be constructed. That's not included in this.
any idea how much that would be?
Their estimate was 300,000.
Okay, that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
Councilman Magazine.
These aerators are below the surface of the water, correct?
Well, they're pulling from below the surface, but the aerators themselves are actually on the surface.
Oh, okay. Because I've had some experience with that myself, and if it's done right, it can be very attractive.
Yes.
Okay.
The next project is the Adero Canyon project. We are actually in the process of working on that one. We have $20,000 that we budgeted for some things we need to do preliminary before the main source of our money. The balance of it is available through starting July the 1st. When they did the original estimate back in 2005, they did not include at that time, because we didn't have the funds for it, the restroom building, picnic ramada, as well as a low seating wall and a bump out area for scenic views down into the valley from that location. So when the $1.5 million was put into place, it did not include those items. So that's the bulk of the reason why the cost has gone from $1.5 million, as it was estimated back then, to the $2.285 million that's shown now. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. The intent is, again, on July the 1st, we're in a position then to contract and have the architect complete the design from 95% where we're at now to 100%, and then bid the project.
Madam Mayor?
Councilman.
I was going to ask, even though we're going to finish the full set of docks for the bid, this is still an architecture bid. We haven't really tested the market yet, so we're hoping that it may come in below this amount, correct?
That's the hope, yes. Because any amount we can reduce it about would save in the CIP fund.
Exactly.
Because the development fees obviously need to be spent in that particular area. The good news is, between the additional amount that we've collected through development fees and interest on the account, it's gone from the $1.5 million to $1.8 million. So that's at least some good news.
What happens then to the trailhead at Eagle's Nest? Because that, I assume, was just opened in the interim until we get our own trailhead access, because there we've got a full bathroom and the parking, and what's going to happen to that?
Actually, the intent was that would stay in place, because this would gain access from the southern part of the property. What we have through Golden Eagle allows us access to from the northern end of the property. So it was intended that that would stay in place, and we continue to use that.
And that's in an agreement with Eagle's Nest, that we
With-
could continue to use it?
Yes, with MCO.
Okay.
We have a long-term plan with them for that.
Okay,
In
great.
fact, we help fund some of the improvements that were made there. So it's a long-term arrangement.
Okay.
Just so I can be clear too, to Councilmember Yates' point, obviously we have $1.8 million that we collected in development fees on this project. Our goal is to try to stay as close as we can to that, so we don't have to use the extra dollars. We put extra money in because J2, the firm that has done this project, the planning and engineering for this project, believes that it will be closer to $2.2 million. But as we're aware, some of the projects that they have estimated, they tend to overestimate, so we're hoping that we can be pretty much on the 1.8.
Conservatively estimated.
Exactly. So we're hoping we'll be under the total project cost that you see here.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, Councilwoman Hanson.
Well, and architects tend to design the nicest thing they can come up with. So a lot of times we come up with a Cadillac design when we really just need a Chevy. So
Absolutely.
it just really seems like this particular project can be value engineered to come closer to what we've got, so we can keep that other CIP.
Absolutely, and I think, Mark, aren't we trying to follow a theme that we started up at Eagles Nest with the Gabions? And so we have a certain look and appearance that is really low maintenance to begin with, and even the restrooms will be of such a finish that it's going to be very easy to maintain and not. So I think the architects might come in with one idea, but what we really have in mind might be a different. But we'll work through that through the design phase. I think we're at 95% now,
Yes.
but when we get to the 100%, we'll make sure that we emphasize that.
And that plan will obviously be reviewed by town staff too, so we've got the opportunity to look at it several times more.
And come to you for ultimate award.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Go on.
The next project is a relatively new one, but it's been discussed for some time, and brought up different times, is some kind of an access between Avenue of Fountains across into Fountain Park. As you may recall, there's a fairly steep hill there and a drainage area at the bottom of it. So it's going to present some challenges. We're going to ask some architects to give us some proposals on what their concept of a design might look like and what the estimated cost to be. So several of them will be providing that information, and we'll be picking somebody to make a recommendation that would ultimately go back to the council. This $375 is an estimate from our perspective on what we think the project might cost, but we'll have a much better feel for once we get those estimates back again from the potential architects. There's some challenges, obviously, not just with topography here, but the feeling was also if we were to make those ADA accessible, then there needs to be some walkways and some paths. We're probably going to end up with a design that will include not only ramps for handicapped, but also stairs for those that are ambulatory. So you'll likely see a combination of those two factors.
If I may too, I'm sorry,
No,
Councilman
go ahead.
Reeves. One of the other ideas that we have or concept is that, and this was something that had been discussed well before my time, but right there at Saguaro and the Avenue, there will be a deck that has a look and appearance like we have on the Avenue. So, and we're talking about, since the fountain is directly behind there, you can have when you see it at different places around the country, little Kodak moments where you can have your picture taken right here. So we're looking at that, and then obviously, since we do so many events on the street, and particularly in the green in the park, there's going to be increased mobility and access to the park as well as to the avenue. So I think it's just depending on how it's designed and how it looks. I mean, it might be something that is kind of neat and exciting and will really help improve access to the park from people coming from other areas of downtown. I'm sorry, I
Councilman
didn't mean
Yates,
to.
did you have something? No. Okay.
The next one is Four Peaks, the bus barn demolition. It's a project cost of $75,000. We are just completing the level 1 environmental assessment was just completed. I got the report the day before yesterday. Haven't had a chance to go through it other than a quick cursory look, but have a conference call set up with the consultant that did the work from Kimley Horn to talk through what a report shows, but it does not appear to show any contaminants on the site, which was our major concern. The next step after that would be approval for the demolition, and then we're planning on doing some revegetation temporarily of the existing site where the bus barn is, but also some permanent work along the roadway there with native vegetation. So that would finish out the $75,000. Should be adequate funds to do that based on the estimates from the architect.
And I know that this means so much to the neighborhood.
Exactly.
They have been asking for this for years, and I know that you tried your best to accommodate them by replacing the screening in front, and we've tried to do so much, but it is just a real eyesore, and they're really excited about this, I can tell you.
Mayor?
Yes,
Hi,
Councilman
Mayor.
DePorter.
It's Nick. Just to echo, sound like a couple from the sky. I just want to echo Mayor Kavanaugh's comments. I live almost directly across across the street from the bus barn. So,
Ah.
so my neighbors that know that make sure that I'm well aware of how much they dislike it every time I see them. So I appreciate that. So like a new entryway into the park for people to access it. I think it was great. Thank you.
Can he vote on this, or is there a conflict of interest? I would like to raise a question, if I could. Going back,
Councilor Magazine. Go
going
ahead.
back, Mark, to the Fountain Park access improvements, just as one example. As we go further on in the presentation, there are obviously things that we can't do in the coming year or so. How do you decide on this kind of a project?
Well, I think part of the reason we put that dollar cost in is because we wanted to reflect what we estimated. We think after the evaluation by the architect, we'll have a much better feel for what those costs might be. And then the council will have a decision based on what those costs are, if they want to move forward with the project or not.
Yeah, I think I wasn't clear. I'm making a different, I'm asking a different kind of question, which is, if you look at that $375,000, there are other projects as we go on, civic center improvements and so on. They're in the out years, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. How did you decide that this is the project we should be doing now as opposed to some of these others?
Well, I think the suggestion had been made that we bring this item forward just to take a look at what those costs might be. And so while it represents a cost of $375, that's the total estimate for not only design work but also construction. All we're committing to at this point is to take a look at what the design cost would be and then ultimately what the construction cost would be.
Maybe I can answer your question. Going back to the original SWABAC plan, and when I was with the chamber at the time and on the committee, and we did the whole vision for this area, there was in the plan a connectivity between the avenue to bring it right down into the lake. So that's why it's always kind of been part of it. And we've always sort of thought about how we could possibly do this, but because it's the topography that makes it difficult.
Yeah, again, I'm going back to process. I don't argue that it would be desirable. I've been out there with some folks who actually were talking about doing something like this, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just raising the issue that there are other items, costly items, in the future that we're putting off. And I just always want to be in a position to be able to look at all of it and say, what's the most important? That's all.
I think that's
Again,
what it's here for. It's
again,
just kind of like taking it out of our toolbox and saying, okay, and plus this kind of goes along with the downtown fun and making it easier to get into the park. But since one of our priorities is also hosting events and having more events, this would be a very beneficial component, assisting people to get down into the event area. So I think it's a good exercise just to get an idea of what it would cost us if we did want to move this up from the back burner and include it in an earlier than later.
And again, before we move forward on any construction whatsoever, we would be back to the council with the different concepts and the cost to make a decision.
Right. This was also something that the business community had asked for because we hold a lot of the events in the park, and you don't get normally the people to walk all the way down to the end and out and then back to the avenue. So they wanted that connectivity so that anything going on in the park will draw those people not only towards Plaza Fountain side, but also across the street.
And if I may, Councilmember Magazine, as you see here, the funding is the Downtown Strategy Fund, which can only be used for downtown. So that is what kind of differentiates us maybe some of the projects around the campus here.
Okay, alley paving.
Needs to say that's not my area.
Back in 2007, actually, council approved resolution 2007-45, which was a part of the MAG PM10 reduction. In that resolution, it talked about finishing off unpaved alleys in the town. We've done 3 phases so far. This is the 4th phase. This is behind the Messenger Funeral Home, and then it kind of turns and follows the Colony Wash. You can see right in the middle, there's a SRP box, so that's gonna need to be relocated. These are pretty straightforward projects, you know, nothing fancy. We're gonna grade it, pave it, make sure it drains properly, and that's pretty much it. So, this project is slated to start next year. Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulder paving. This is one of the projects that we got a grant for a very long time ago, and due to the staffing levels, we just haven't been able to keep up with it. It's pretty much stuck at the 60% design phase right now. We've re-engaged the consultant that was brought on board. They're giving us an estimate to continue with the project. They're going to still need to go through the ADOT administers the grant, so we're going to still need to go through the right-of-way process that they have. There's an environmental process that ADOT requires to get that grant funding. So this is going to add about 5 feet of paved shoulder onto the one-lane area of Fountain Hills Boulevard, where it's just basically, it's millings right now. And there's only about maybe 8 inches to a foot past the white stripe for somebody to walk, or else they're in the dirt. The plan is to do a pavement thickness on that 5 feet that could be widened in the future, so it's not really just throwaway, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Is there any possibility of losing the grant? Is there a time?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We're getting pretty close to the end. These ones have just been deferred and deferred and deferred.
So, Paul, to that point, do you know when that might be?
I think it's 2017, so we need to get going.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
And Paul, what, in the event, is there another section of Fountain Hills Boulevard that we could use this for?
The grant was specifically,
Specific for this
because the
project?
CMAQ is actually, it's congestion mitigation air quality, so it's actually, it's to pave that dirt shoulder to help with air quality.
Okay, thank you.
But it has a lot of other benefits.
Correct.
Oh,
And
yeah.
safety. for
But bicycles
Safety.
and walking.
The erosion, every time it rains,
Yep.
it gets
Right.
washed out, and then a wheel goes off the side of the road,
Yeah.
you might end up in the,
It's just that road needs a complete redo, and it's just.
Well, we're gonna talk about that.
Okay,
All right, we won't get ahead.
add a 0, right?
A couple. This just shows the available funding and carryover, and Craig can answer any questions at the end about the financial portions. Future capital projects. Fire station number 3, this is actually in the fire department master plan.
Paul, hang on one second.
Oh.
Vice Mayor Leger has a question.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a red flag, this kind of concerns me when our capital budget is this low. I don't think we've ever carried there hasn't been a capital budget that low in 10 years. We're spending a lot of money. And in the event we find ourselves in an unpredictable situation, that's troubling. And which leads me to my next question in terms of deferring a few of these projects to next year. The grant projects, of course, as Mayor mentioned, are date sensitive. So it's just a red flag. The good news is historically, a lot of our projects have bled over from one year to another, so I'm not sure that's going to be the case here, but I just think it's something we need to keep an eye on throughout the year and maybe look at how we manage the timing of some of these projects if we approve them. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Paul.
Okay. Fire station number 3, this is in the, as I said, the fire department master plan. It's located this is a piece of town-owned property on Sunridge Drive and Desert Canyon. It's really kind of a big hill there. Just to the, I guess it's the east is where the Desert Canyon, or the Sunridge Canyon Golf Course operations area is. So it's tucking a small fire station and a future park in there. This is one of 2 projects that the town actually collects a development fee for. So when new residential and commercial projects come in, they pay a development fee for fire service. That fund right now has $46,000 in the development fee, and we're estimating that almost $2.7 million of the project is unfunded. So in 2021, when we're estimating this project, you would really, if it becomes a critical need in the community, you would be looking at a bond to do this project.
So are there certain developments that are going to make this a critical need, or?
If Eagles Nest starts getting built out, state trust land,
State trust land, okay.
you know, the fire guys can answer it better. They do their fire diamonds and calls of service and response times, and
Fire guys?
I'm assuming they're back behind me.
Madam Mayor, as we're waiting for Randy, Paul, what is the impact fee right now on this? I know we just lowered it, and I think it's around $4,000.
Oh, no, it's much less than that.
Less.
1,600?
That's parks and fire.
Parks and fire, 1,600 a door.
Residential,
Yeah.
it's a square footage calculation for commercial.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, Randy.
All right,
I'm
Chief.
sorry.
And commercial's only fire, not parks.
I'm sorry, Chief.
Chief Roberts?
Mayor and Council, just to answer your question about the master plan, that was put in place just because Eagles Nest was so undeveloped at the time, still low density, not causing us any problem with response times at this point, but as the Darrow goes in, as the state trust land goes in, we have to keep an eye on those response times, so we don't end up with a problem like we had in south part of Fountain Hills. But, in 2021, we'll just have to look at it again and see what the need is.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions for the chief? No? Thanks for coming up.
All right, and when you build a fire station, you need a fire truck.
Oh.
So this is for this project is to purchase the pumper truck, the brush truck. You have vehicle radios, portable radios for the firefighters, the breathing apparatus for the firefighters, your heart monitor and defibrillator, thermal imaging camera, and then their extrication equipment. So this would to equip the major equipment that fire station would need. And again, this is all unfunded.
Okay, and just so everybody understands, all of the equipment belongs to the town. Yes.
We've been monitoring this.
Councilman DePorter?
Hi, I had a quick about that. Sorry, I don't know how to interrupt over the phone.
No, go ahead, that's okay. It's a little hard to hear, so could you speak slowly?
Sure. My question is for that new equipment you're thinking about potentially bought for a station. Wouldn't some of that be coming from the station we will be closing?
When you get equipment from the station
No,
you're closing to
That fire,
boost.
this is fire station number 3.
Right.
That equipment's gonna be going to fire station number 2.
Yeah, this is number 3, if
Got it.
needed,
Sorry.
by Sunridge.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, staff has been monitoring the area around the Centennial Circle. Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of the concrete heaving. You can see in the picture, we've been grinding down the concrete over time. So it's a project, this is one we've been deferring. We keep track of it, see how much we can grind it. But we're gonna get to the point where that whole area around the Centennial Circle is gonna need to be redone at some point.
Mayor,
Wow. Councilman Magazine.
how old is Centennial Circle?
Centennial Circle is fairly new. This is the original, this area is original to the
Community.
This
Civic
was
Center.
for the centennial of the state, so I think it was done in time for that, which
Yeah.
would be 2012.
Centennial, yeah. The Centennial Circle used to be, before it was the circle and brick pavers, it was a dirt area.
Okay, I just wondered why, if this was happening so fast.
Yeah, if you look at it honestly, the trees are right there. You can see kind of in the areas of the trees it's heaving. There's some grass areas closer to the community center where there's overspray of watering. So we would look at making those more desert landscape rather than grass.
Thank you.
Pocket Park West, this is the small park that would go next to Fire Station 3. And again, this is another project that the town is collecting a development fee for. So this would build a Ramada and then 2 age-specific playground equipment areas. This need for a pocket park in the northwest part of town is identified in the general plan. So this is filling a need that's identified in the general plan.
Excuse me.
Councilman Yates.
Although it fills the need, is this spot mandated to put it there?
No, but this is really only one of the only town-owned pieces of land in that part of town. So,
Along those same lines, hypothetically down the road, if a piece of property came available on Saguaro on Henry's part of the neighborhood, would that satisfy that same need, or is that on the wrong side of Shea?
The general plan actually identifies the need for a small park south of Shea
South
as
of
well.
Shea. Got it, okay.
Councilwoman Hanson.
I know this was part of the planning process, but to me, this type of a need is more of a want. And looking at our finances, it's hard for me to justify adding more new facilities when we really need to concentrate on maintaining and upgrading what we've already got. So, I mean, to me, it's more of a nicety, and I
Sure.
don't, see our citizens suffering because we don't have it.
And just to your point, we park this in year 5 of the capital improvement plan because there is a component of development fees. There's a certain time period when you're supposed to, by statute, when you're supposed to spend those by. And this is basically that limit of that time frame.
And it would have to be specifically to that part.
What it's collected for,
in
yes.
that location.
Area.
Well, in the area, not that specific location, but this is the fire station and this pocket park were identified in the system development fee report, and that's how the town's development fee was calculated.
And it has to be new rather than replaced?
I believe so.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hanson, development impact fees are only allowed for impacts created by new growth. So replacement of an existing infrastructure has to be offset against the fees, so it's a zero-sum game. You can't improve current parks with development fees, at least for the last 5 years or so. Whether it has to be this park depends upon what you all include in the infrastructure improvement plan that goes along with the development fees. That current IIP includes it at this location, but a park is a park as long as it's in the same service area and you have one. The whole town is one service area. You don't have multiple. So if you were going to move it in the service area when you're somewhere else within the town, that's within your next IIP update.
So wasn't there a park originally planned for the Elman property? Wasn't there supposed to be a park in there?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there's a significant park in there, but none of it is in their current development fee study.
Okay, so this money couldn't be used for that park if that land was turned over to the town for a park?
It would have to be included in your infrastructure improvements plan and your fees modified to match the cost of that park. As it was originally envisioned, the land was going to be from the developer. One side of the park was going to be developed and dedicated. The other side, I think, was going to be development fee funded, but I'm not certain without looking at the development agreement again. But whatever you do with it, it has to go in your IIP because the statute requires everything that you're charging fees for to be within that IIP. Your capital improvement plan is the basis for the IIP. So if you're ever going to have it in there or you're going to collect development fees for it for a future use, it has to be here and there. That's why you have a lot of projects that aren't really within the current horizon, but are within the period of, hopefully, time.
Madam Mayor?
Councilman Yates.
To Councilwoman Hanson's point, maybe not fixing an existing, but expanding on, if there's space to expand more, would that count under the same calculation of zero-sum game?
If it's a growth-related expansion, sure.
Okay.
When the statute was rewritten a few years ago, the main thrust of it was that you have to account for your current needs in the study. So if you have a deficiency in an area for your current residents of 10, and you want to build a new park in that area, but it's going to bring up that 10, you can't use development fees for it. So deficiencies of existing residents have to be made up from town dollars that are not development fees.
Thank you.
So it forces the community to overextend themselves. and build new things that are gonna cost you more money to take care of. It's just, the whole concept to me is like,
It's government.
Well, it's a lovely statute that was given to us as a gift.
Maybe we can change the statute. How about that? All right, who's up? Oh, Mark again.
Four Peaks Phase 6 shows you an estimated project cost for this particular phase of $800,000. It is currently unfunded. You may recall we talked about the bus barn area, which is that area. Right here in this particular area. It shows being replaced by down the road tennis courts, and that's what this is designed to cover. Tennis courts, pickleball courts, there's a group ramada there, and also a parking area, which doesn't exist in that particular area right now. Total estimated project cost is $3.3 million. This is the last park that has a master plan developed that is not developed to the extent that the master plan shows it. It also shows the balance remaining in the future after you took the $800,000 out would still be $2.5 million. And to use a term that Paul had mentioned earlier, probably looking at some kind of a bond issue if we were to get this thing through based on funding.
And would that large grassy area that's there now, would that just stay like that, or is that going to be used for something? The one in the upper,
This area here would
Yeah.
remain the same. This
okay.
area would be reoriented a little bit, and then the lights that are all original would be replaced in this particular area. The only other change would be in this area here where some basketball courts would go in.
And would there be any change if, let's say, they tear down the school building, or?
At this point, I would say no, because we don't own that property. If they would have deed it to us, they're
Well, maybe they'll give it to
doing
us.
something. I don't think that's very
Add
good.
it to the park.
Yeah.
That would have to
The
go
the only
to
thing I wanted to mention is,
vote.
we had talked about redoing the tennis courts. The tennis courts are currently located here. The one change, instead of locating tennis courts here, we would likely keep them here, because the lights and everything else would be too costly if we had to move them. So that's the only change from when this master plan was put together.
And the basketball courts would still stay?
The basketball courts would probably shift over and take the place over here.
Okay, but they'll still have, I know those
And
are
that's
very
what's there now.
popular.
Yeah.
They're still used.
Not only the bus barn itself, but that area around it, it has deteriorated since we took it over from the school district over 15 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Nope. Move on to more alley paving.
More alley paving. This is the last unpaved alley in town. This is the one that wraps around from Glenbrook to Fountain Hills Boulevard. Kind of goes behind the Glenbrook Creamery, and then there's a SRP substation back there. We like to use this area to stage equipment when there's road projects. This is just a, future cost if we want to continue and get that resolution that was approved by council to get it done. To Council Member or Vice Mayor Lejay's point, that resolution didn't really have any timing in it. It just said you had to do it, as soon as funding was available. So we actually did skip a couple years. We moved those back, so we're trying to get those back in. Fountain Hills Boulevard widening. This is a new project. This is only $100,000. This is to do a design concept report to see what would be needed for the widening, what drainage improvements would be done. Just off the top of my head, you're probably looking at least, $4, $5, $6 million project. A lot of people don't see it, but there's some serious drainage issues at the bottom by the Emerald Wash and other areas that need to be addressed. So we would hire a consultant, have them go through, just do some surveying, some preliminary layout, identify the drainage project or drainage needs, and then just do some estimating so that in the event that council did want to go out for a future bond to widen that road, we would have some good backup information for the cost.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
Paul, on projects like this, because this is a main artery, aren't there some other funding sources, grants specific for design and inspection, or?
Not on this one.
No?
It's not, it's a main artery for us, but, you know, realistically, in the grand scheme of things around the valley, it's pretty small.
Okay.
So if I move on to the next one, this is the Shea Boulevard widening. We just did from the Beeline to Technology. This finishes off from Technology to Palisades Boulevard. So both sides of Shea need to be widened from Technology to Fountain Hills Boulevard, and then coming down the hill from Palisades to Fountain Hills Boulevard needs to be widened as well. This project, because it is a larger road, a much larger volume of traffic, it was identified in the MEG Prop 400. So they do show funding for this project. Their timing is, again, we would want to, in 17-18, we would want to do the design concept report, roughly $100,000. It's a 70% MEG project, 30% town match. So they're showing $70,000 in 2017. Then over 18-19, they're showing about $750,000 for design work. And then in 20 and 21, they're showing the MEG portion of about $3.6 million for construction. And then the town's 30% of all that is almost $2 million. We're showing $30,000 in CIP fund because that would be the match to do that design concept report. When I asked the town engineer how he came up with the estimate for the project to get it into MEG, he said it was, you know, back of a napkin that no longer exists. So I have no idea how they came up with their cost of the project and cost share. So that's why we want to do the design concept report to make sure that that funding really is realistic. There's going to be, you know, the next to Fire Rock where it drops off, and then on the north side of the road where it goes straight up, there's going to be some challenges. So that's what we really need to do, a design concept report to see what can actually fit in that envelope. That's why it's never been done, because it's an expensive project.
And just to let you know too, to Paul's point, we don't really know what the cost is, and I think the design concept report will give us a better handle on what the total project will cost and what our match or our 30% match will be. Really, the policy question for the council is this something you really want? Do you really want to widen it more than what we have now, or are you satisfied with what we have now? I know we have probably traffic projections, which probably was driving this, so that's something to keep in mind. So, I mean, I hate to lose money and then have problems later on because we were short-sighted that way, but I've heard from some people that they don't think this would be a good project, but I think that this would be something that in the future is going to be more and more viable as we have more growth in this area, not just our town, but Scottsdale and people traversing down the Beeline.
And when we had looked at this in MAG and looked at, you know, they're going ahead 20 years, they said that this is going to be a major corridor, which would be good for us if it does open up like that, which is why they're
Help the
preparing.
commercial.
It's going to, yeah, they really expect Shea to be a major corridor, especially hitting the Beeline. And of course, we don't know what will happen in the future with other enterprises, with the tribe. You know, they're talking about another casino, and Salt River also, with all of their improvements, just their entertainment alone is going to bring people down Shea and then take the Beeline to their entertainment section of their new aquarium and the other tourist attractions they're planning for that. So they're looking ahead 20 years, and they're telling us that we need this.
From staff's perspective, when the Saguaro Boulevard bond is paid off in the next 4 or 5 years, you know, we don't know right now, but we want to do those design concept reports to get some pretty good numbers. It might be that council wants to go out for a bond package. Could be one question, could be multiple questions. Widen Fountain Hills Boulevard, you know, bond this portion of the town's match on Shea, and then add in there some, you know, mill and overlay type projects as well.
Paul, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the timing. What was the timing on this grant?
So In MAG, they show a small reimbursement in 2017 that would get us the design concept report. And in 2018 and 19, they're showing roughly $750,000 over those 2 years in reimbursements for design. And then in 2021, they're showing about $3.6 million in reimbursement for construction.
Okay.
So,
Anything else? Okay.
The Intelligent Transportation System, ITS, this has been a project that's been in the CIP, out of the CIP. It was put back in last year. This was a grant that was awarded many years ago. It was going to put a bunch of conduit in the ground, fiber optic to link in all the traffic signals, tie them together. But honestly, the bang for the buck isn't there. I don't think council really wants to tear up Saguaro Boulevard to put in conduits. You know, you could link the signals on Shea. There is a lot of conduit in the ground on Shea, so you could do that, but it's already there. Most larger cities that have longer stretches of roads, they have all their traffic signals linked, and then they go back to a traffic operations centers. That's where you see the big video boards, where they have a staff person dedicated that watches that if something wrong with a signal pops up, they can kind of reprogram from their office. This was a nice grant to go after, but it's really, the town's not big enough for the need, and it's not a really good bang for your buck. And currently, we've been showing $290,000 as the town's match portion. And if this project were recommended for removal, that money could shift to some other priority that the council may have.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Magazine?
In a previous life, I was very much involved in trying to get synchronized traffic signals and so on some major thoroughfares. I hear what you're saying, but the previous discussion was that we could be looking at a significant increase in traffic on Shea in the years to come. And it seems to be a kind of a disconnect.
Yeah. Most of the conduit is in Shea Boulevard.
So you're not suggesting that we make a decision not to abandon doing that?
No.
Okay. Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah. No, that's there. There's just a couple small gaps that could be filled with this other project.
Okay,
And that's it, unless
that's it.
Craig has, I don't know if Craig has any comments. As Councilmember Leger pointed out, you can see how it's kind of front-end loaded. Typically, when we budget CIP projects, we budget them all in 1 year, and you don't get them done and they carry over. So you never want to shortchange yourself on a budget. And since our fiscal year begins July 1st, there's always this juggling act of how much you budget in 1 year versus the next year. So you tend to front load it just so you have the money. All the money for Fire Station 2 is in next fiscal year. It's probably, some's going to have to get carried over at some point. That's just how you budget for capital projects over a fiscal year. Then we kind of tail off, and then it ramps up again in the outer years. But that's really because of those projects that are maybe possibly future bond projects. But the council member, or Vice Mayor Leger's point, the fund is getting pretty low. And what you see here pretty much exhausts what's going in, because council also passed, I don't know if it was by resolution or ordinance, that $200,000 of CIP fund every year is going to go to pavement maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a priority, and that's where it shifted.
Okay. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor. Bill Myers?
All right.
Thank you very much for the
Bill.
opportunity to give a few brief words. I will talk on just one subject, and that is the Darrow Canyon Trailhead. My name's Bill Myers.
I knew it.
Just a wild guess. I'm a member of the McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission, MMPC, and I concur with staff's recommendation to not only put the $1.8 million in the 16-17 budget, but the $486,000 in CIP. Fortunately, Mark has been kind enough to allow 3 members of the MMPC review the architectural and landscape plans. Those are 100% done, with the idea of seeing if there's something that we might spot that hasn't been spotted so far. 2 of those members are civil engineers themselves, so we have a little bit of a diversity. I've been in real estate for about 30 years myself. And shortly, maybe next week, we'll give a memo back to Mark and the town suggesting some items that they ought to take a look at. Hopefully, we can build the whole thing for the $2,285,000. If not, perhaps some of those suggestions and other suggestions will come into play. Councilpersons Hanson suggested this, the Cadillac. I'm not sure if it is or not, but perhaps we can take a look at some of those items. I'm thrilled that this is coming to a head. I think if we can begin complete that trailhead, it's going to have some economic benefits. I can't tell you how many more rooms we'll sell, or how many more restaurant meals we'll sell, or how many more homes will come. But when I talk to other people in other cities, Scottsdale, Phoenix, Cave Creek, places north of us, it is really an economic benefit. I'll be very brief. I'm glad to see this in the CIP. Hopefully we can get it done for a little bit less, but I make an analogy of building a bridge. If you have a bridge that's 2,285 feet long, and you decide not to build the last 486 feet of it, it doesn't do you much good. So hopefully we'll build a whole bridge, kind of bridging the promises from the past to the children and grandchildren and their children in the future, and hopefully we can get this thing done. Thank you very much.
Bill, if you don't mind me asking you a question, what was the total cost of the preserve?
Pardon?
The total cost of the preserve, do you know?
Answer is no. Ballpark is, principal and interest is a little over 17 million.
17 million?
Yeah.
So we really do want a trailhead so we can get into that 17 million.
Yes. Get some use out of it. I think when it's built, everybody's going to be surprised how many people go up there and all the great benefits it's going to bring. Educational benefits, yeah, we can tell from the other towns who have preserves that that's a huge benefits. I'll be happy to see it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Is there any further council discussion? Councilman Magazine?
A couple of things. Under the proposed capital projects T5004 to T5016, these are traffic signals, and I wonder what do we need to do to get consideration at least of signal at Avenue of the Fountains and La Montana in terms of a design or however we approach these to get them on the list.
Councilmember Magazine, I think the first step is we want to do a traffic study, and I know that there had been some concerns raised by a member of the public who lost a child over at El Lago and Fountain Hills Boulevard. And I've also heard from the mayor and a few other council members on some other requested traffic studies. So we have currently in the engineering budget some money set aside for engineering studies. I'm also looking at trying to fund some additional traffic studies as supplements for next year. So that would be part of it. So that'd be the very first step, is to evaluate that intersection and then to come up with some possible alternatives to consider.
Are the only criteria accidents and deaths? Because when we looked at this before, there were very few. But I think we've been damn lucky. I, for one, have been. I mean, there's just been so many close calls. And I just wonder how we go about looking at it.
I'll let our Development Services Director address that.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Magazine, in order to put up a traffic signal, you need to meet certain traffic signal warrants. So you could do a warrant study. It will look at accidents, it'll look at volume, wait times, delays, things like that. I think the town attorney will tell you the last thing you want to do is put up a signal where one is not warranted. You can get into trouble that way as well. So that's what you need to look at. I believe there was a study done back in 2008, and I can't remember if they looked at, it was really about a roundabout, but I think they might have analyzed the traffic signal as well. It was a pretty extensive study. The configuration of the intersection has not really changed. From an engineering standpoint, the easiest thing would be a traffic signal. I know people don't like them. Some people are for roundabouts, some people don't like them. Roundabout would have, in my opinion, some major drainage issues. We're also looking at potential development on the corner by Bashas', so I don't know if you really want that there as well. Those are some of the things you need to consider when you look at that.
I just want it carefully looked at, that's all.
Yeah, so I think a traffic study is warranted at that location.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive study, though.
Okay. One other thing, some may think this is frivolous. I've raised it before. And that is lights downtown on the trees. I've been to a number of other towns that have this, and it really seems to make a huge difference in terms of demarcation of the downtown area. And people really like them. And I wonder if we could consider that part of the downtown, from the Downtown Development Fund.
My understanding is that the downtown fund can be used for downtown infrastructure improvement projects. So if there's a consensus for us to put that in as a project, we'd be happy to put that in as a potential project. I just don't know. It just depends on what the cost estimates would be.
Sure. We actually asked the Saguaro Boulevard contractor for an estimate. Now, are you just talking the palm trees?
Yes.
Just the palm trees?
And in fact, they don't even have to go all the way up. I've seen some towns where they go halfway up.
Sure. The Nesbitt Contracting gave us a price, I believe off the top of my head, around $140,000, and that would finish off the pedestrian lights on the south side of the avenue down to Verde River, and it would include receptacle outlets from about MCSO parking lot all the way down to Saguaro. So that's what you could put in with the downtown fund money. Then you'd have to budget ongoing maintenance, which I think we looked at it was like $20,000 to $25,000 a year.
I don't think so. In fact, the estimate I saw was about $20,000 for the lights, LEDs, that they'd have to be kept on 24 hours.
That's just the string lights.
That's what I'm talking, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but there's no power on the south side of the avenue to put them in, to power those lights.
That's where the cost comes from.
Minor detail.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We budget $30,000 annually for the holiday lights, correct?
It's my understanding, something close to that.
So obviously that would go away, so whatever that maintenance ideally would be deferred based on that.
A portion of that $30,000, which is the palm tree lights, would go away.
Still have all the decoration lights
Yeah.
and
Oh,
neon
it's all, okay, I
lights and
apologize. I thought
the
that was
other
just for the
trees.
lights. Got it.
Yeah, and there's, and I don't know if
Santa
that's,
Claus.
would you rather have some study or some way of figuring out exactly what is done? Because I've seen some illustrations of, having string lights going across the street in a decorative fashion, like pearls and with Portland lights and so those types of things I've seen. I've seen archways that are lit in different parts of the country. So, I mean, those are very impactful. So I'm not sure what, are you hung up on the trees or would you be open?
I'm open to any of it.
Okay.
That livens up the downtown, demarcation of the downtown. I don't think I'd be for spending $100 and some odd thousand. But I would like to look at alternatives and see what it would cost and see whether or not we could get it done.
Great. So we'll try to figure out a way that we can, incorporate this somehow as far as an estimate and figure out how we can do it.
Well, and that's something that can come out of that $400,000 project for the
Right.
downtown public improvements, the infrastructure.
Madam Mayor, if, I'm sorry, Alan, did you
So
have-
what's the next step? I mean,
Well, what we can do is we can add it based, I mean, the purpose of tonight is to obtain from the council priorities related to the CIP. So we could put a placeholder in here, we can kind of research it a little bit further.
I mean, if you had to ask me off the top of my head, I would put another project in for $200,000 for downtown lighting from the downtown fund.
and remove the
It's different funds, but
Different fund. This is the non-intelligent
I'd just like the
one.
staff to do whatever they can do to
Okay.
to us and tell us.
So I think we're getting, there appears to be a consensus here, so we'll go ahead and amend this and make that change. Were there any other thoughts or concepts or things that either you disagreed that were in the plan or you'd like to change priorities?
No, I
'cause that's,
just like to see different options for the lighting, not just, look at the palm trees, but I know
the string lighting, yeah,
Councilman
there's,
Yates had brought up the string lighting, quite a few areas are going that way.
okay. Are there any other thoughts on what is proposed before you tonight in the CIP? Any other priorities or changing years or so it appears that,
Hi, Mayor. In regards to the fountain, I was wondering, has there ever been a thought of approaching one of our utility or community partners to sponsor the fountain in some way or help subsidize it?
for Councilmember DePorter, are you talking about for the operating costs, like the power, electricity costs for that?
Yes, sir.
I haven't heard, I haven't been here long enough. Has there been some attempt at that in the past? Okay. So I don't know if you could hear Councilmember Hanson, but she was saying that there have been attempts in the past years, and there was really not
Nick,
much
there's this
support.
professional media outlet called LinkedIn.
Yes, I've heard of it. It's incredibly powerful. But I guess my question is, I understand. With all due respect to things that have happened in the past, I think I would love to see us repackaging opportunities and approaching an SRP, a Cox about doing something like that. I'm out there a lot in the community, and when we're in other municipalities, I'm watching. I just love that an Advent Center that Cox just put over $150,000 for wireless and some tech improvement. So, love to just see us maybe put together an outreach team of some sort. And I'm sorry, this has little to do with the CIP outside of just the large cost of the fountain. I know it's not a capital improvement, but see if we could be the boss on that end and see if we can get some dollars from that.
It really did call. Yeah, I didn't get all of that. Grady, did you get pretty much the gist of that?
I'm becoming better at understanding.
Yeah, you got a lot of interference.
Are you on your cell phone?
I am on a cell phone.
Yeah,
but
I think that's the difference. The cell phone is just causing a garbled situation for us. We apologize.
But we
I'll
think,
follow up later.
I think you said that it wouldn't hurt to try.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, we can do that,
We heard that.
We'll make an appointment with you and SRP.
yeah.
Madam Mayor, back to
You got it.
Alan's point. All right, do we approve this as written, or do we make some caveats to give some leeway into looking at some of these other ones? We don't want to lock ourselves in, but.
Well,
at the
this
same
is a special session, so
Right.
unlike a work session, you
We
have the
need to give
ability
a
to
direction.
act on it tonight. If you wish to move and direct us to do that, that would be great. And if you had any other thoughts, Councilmember Yates or anybody else on the council?
Per tonight's discussion.
Excuse me?
Per tonight's discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
Mayor, if I may, this will probably be presented in the budget, so we'd have another shot at it. So
Absolutely.
I feel comfortable taking what's been put together, incorporate that in the budget, look at the budget, and then we can take another shot at it. So, with that being said, I'm not sure you need a motion.
So is that a motion to
Yeah, we
table
do
into the
need-
budget?
No,
We do need a motion.
We do?
Yeah.
Mayor, can I Mayor Kavanaugh, council member, so what I'm hearing is if you're kind of happy what was presented tonight, we're going to delete the one intelligent transportation signal project, and then we're going to add another project, downtown lighting,
Lighting Avenue, the fountain.
probably like $200,000 from the downtown fund.
Mayor?
Sounds like it.
I'll move to approve the priorities for the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2016 through 17 as per tonight's discussion.
I would like to second that.
All right, any other discussion on the motion?
Well said.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
All right,
Mayor,
then,
I'm sorry, before we close, are you going to close?
yeah.
Okay.
Did you have something else on this?
I do.
Okay.
First, I want to congratulate the staff. I think this was a great presentation. Very impressive and very easy to follow. The last issue of the Fountain Hills Times had a headline that said we had a cumulative $5.5 million deficit. Well, I know darn well that when people hear we're paving tennis courts and doing access to the park and so on, none of which I have a problem with, people are going to say, what's going on? Where's this money coming from? And I would just like to have somebody articulate exactly where this money's coming from, with the hope that the press would pick it up and try to explain it to the public.
Tonight?
Right now. Right now.
Okay. We have a lot of different, what we call sources of capital improvement project money, and the Development Services Director or the Finance Director can certainly address that.
Madam Mayor, to Alan's point, and if the media would be open to the idea, there's that section, in my opinion, or my turn, et cetera, where, to your point, a letter from you or the staff kind of explaining that whole process. You're right, every year when we go through this, you're absolutely right. Folks think we're paying for art, we're paying for greening, we're paying for all these things that just simply isn't true.
Mayor, if I may. Yeah, exactly, for those of us that have sat here, I mean, it's always the tough decision to move forward spending money when there's a need for revenue, and the citizenry doesn't understand that. And nor did I when I first stepped on the council. I think municipal funding is very complicated. And I think what works for myself in this conversation is to lay out that we have these things called dedicated funds that are legislated, and that is where the money is spent. We had that same discussion with the improvements on the plaza. It satisfied a number of people when they understood that it took 10 years at 0.1% for that money to be accumulated. So it's a tough nut to crack, and it's people kind of view it as personal financing. We hear that all the time. If this was my personal, checkbook. So it's the complexity associated with municipal financing and dedicated funds. So the answer to your question is simply, how do we justify this? We have a CIP fund, which is dedicated for these purposes, and we're short on that. And the perception there is we're spending money, but at the same time, we're putting our hand out saying we need revenue, and how do we get that? So it's just human nature. I'm not sure you'll ever get over it. You do the best you can educate people.
Well, fortunately, we have a reporter from the Times who's been with us such a long time who understands how this works. So I have no doubt that we're going to get a good explanation in the article about this. But if you have anything that you could add to make it more understandable, or
Mayor,
that you could maybe also give to the Times.
Mayor Kavanaugh, council members, not in the presentation, but as part of your packet, you had a spreadsheet that goes project by project and how much it cost in what year. When you get the capital project section of your budget, it also does that by funding source. And Craig's working on that right now. Based on tonight, there's going to be some updates. So we can get that out. We can get that to Bob Burns. And council members articulated it, but it's hard for the general public to understand. If you look at the bottom of each slide for the current, next year and future year projects, we tried to outline the funding sources. So you have the downtown, the lighting would come from the Downtown Strategy Fund, which is a portion of that 0.1% that was approved for sales tax back in the early 2000s that can only be used for the downtown. Can't go pave a road, well, unless it's in the downtown, sorry. But you can't go, you can't go fix the drainage issues, south of Shea with it. We have grants that are, specific funding sources. You'll also see in there the Capital Projects Fund, which is 50% of the construction sales tax. In the budget and CIP portion, we define what is a capital project. It's typically a project with a value, so more than $50,000, kind of one-time use, has a life expectancy of more than 10 years, so it can't be used for some ongoing maintenance type project. So just to Vice Mayor Leger's point, there are specific funds that can only be used for certain things. The town doesn't lump all their money into one pot and divvy it out. So there's rules that we have to follow of what money can be used for. And if Craig sends that out, it becomes pretty obvious of where you're getting the money from and what you're spending it on.
Okay, and if we could get that to
Yeah.
Bob at the Times, then, we can incorporate that into his article so it's more understandable.
Mayor?
Councilman
And I think if
Hanson.
we, reiterate the fact that some of these things are identified as maintaining what we've got. I mean, there are certain things that are going to fall apart if we don't fix them, keep them well-maintained.
Yeah.
And some of those things we can point to. And one thing I have found since that article came out that really helps a lot is to point out how much of our budget is used on public safety. Because a lot of people don't realize that. And when you say how much of the whole budget it is, they go, oh. And then it kind of like, well, then.
For the record,
And then these other
52%.
things, I think, yeah, but then the other thing
52%.
is that we do, if you look at that list, even like the tennis courts, if they get to a point where they crumble, they're not gonna be usable anymore. And they can become a safety issue. Fountain Hills Boulevard, there's a big safety issue there. So I think there's and then paving the alleys, those are mandates. We can't
Those are
have too much
mandates.
dust. So, you can almost go one by one and give some more information on, this is why we gotta do this. So, it's all in the communication, and I think in my turn, Grady can write a wonderful glowing article.
Yeah. Councilman Magazine?
This conversation reminds me of something I raised before, and I don't think we have to determine it right now, but I really think we should think about whether or not we want to have dedicated funds that are not legislated to us. A lot of it, we have no choice, but there are some where we do. And I think we ought to at least look at whether or not we want to suspend it for some period of time and put those funds into the general operating fund so that we can make priorities based upon the entire fund rather than having pigeonholed certain funds. This is a time when we've got problems. We've got financial issues, as everybody knows. And I just don't think that we should be taking certain amounts of money and putting it in certain funds where they have to be used for in certain ways if we don't have to, if it's volitional on our part. And so I'd like to, again, I don't think we have to discuss it right now, but I'd like to see us discuss it for the future, and maybe we can do it in the context of the budget itself.
Any other comments before I adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourn.